President Biden keeps signing executive orders. We look at the economic impact of canceling the Keystone XL pipeline. And the Biden administration has promised to make the rich pay more in taxes. How might businesses respond? A successful investor warns about the danger of the Fed flooding the market with cheap money. He says investors are like frogs in boiling water. And are you worried about the security of your cryptocurrency? We ask an expert for advice on how to store it safely. In a blow to struggling landlords across the country, the CDC says they can't evict non-paying tenants until at least March 31st. The rule has already been in place for 4 months. So if you're a landlord trying to pay your mortgage or rely on rental income, tough luck. The CDC introduced the rule to try to solve the understandably difficult problem of people losing their jobs during the pandemic and having nowhere to go. The CDC said this could hurt efforts to contain the virus. But landlords are definitely feeling sick. Some estimate there is between $1 to $2 billion in unpaid rent in New York alone. Advocates like the Rent Stabilization Association support the eviction ban, but they want tenants to prove they're struggling financially. It says there's no verification system right now, so it's wide open to take advantage of owners. And if you're a student, you won't need to start paying back your federal student loan again until at least the end of September. The relief was set to expire at the end of the month. Biden didn't order a massive debt cancellation like some Democrats had hoped for. He says that should come from Congress. All this fussing over money anyway. Why not just make everything free, cancel everything? Simple, right? And I talked to Daniel Turner from Power the Future about President Biden's climate-related executive orders, rejoining the Paris Climate Accord, for example. Biden wants to stand in climate solidarity with the rest of the world, but after Trump left the accord, Turner says the U.S. hit all its climate targets anyway, unlike many of the countries that actually stayed in it. So what's the point? And once it rejoins, Turner says the U.S. will need to pay billions of dollars into a fund and will have no oversight in how it's spent. We also discussed the Keystone XL pipeline between the U.S. and Canada. Biden used executive power to cancel it. So asked Turner, what will the impact to the U.S. economy be?
This is just political nonsense because America is crisscrossed by millions of miles of oil and gas pipeline. We have enough pipelines in America right now to go to the moon and back 10 times. Right? This is just one more small infrastructure pipeline. It builds a strong relationship with Canada. It brings their oil from Alberta down to Texas, where it will be refined and then sent across the country or put on ships, put on barges, and sent around the world to be sold, hopefully, to our allies. Why are we giving up this opportunity? Why are we giving up the jobs it will create, the tax revenue it will benefit? Joe Biden claimed he was in favor of infrastructure jobs. He claimed he was in favor of blue-collar union jobs. And on his first day, he has fired thousands of workers in states, Nebraska, the Dakotas. Where are their advocates? Where are their legislators demanding that they have a voice? And that's why I started Power the Future, because those rural workers deserve a voice.
And where is the controversy over this pipeline then? What's the rationale?
Yeah, the only reason why this pipeline was ever controversial is because it crosses an international border, and therefore the United States federal government had to get involved. President Obama's own administration approved it. Now, he sat on that approval, right? He sat on it for years because, like most politicians, he was unwilling to pull the trigger. It got to the Trump administration, and he gave the green light, and it moves forward. So this is a company that has invested millions of dollars, a lot of resources, a lot of work. Is the Biden administration going to pay to have this pipeline removed from the ground? Are they going to pay for the lost investment? So there's something very scary about an administration who thinks by statute they can shut down business that has done the legal work, the ethical work, the environmental work. And I want to know, how far does the statute of limitation go? Can the president sign an executive order that says, well, no, you shouldn't build the Brooklyn Bridge? Why not? Why can't you go back 150 years with an executive order and shut down other businesses that have complied with the law? So this political football is disgusting. It's been used by the environmental left to push an agenda, and the people hurting are these rural workers, and then ultimately the entire American economy will suffer as a result.
So this is all private money that's been used to fund this pipeline. What kind of investment are we looking at so far?
Millions of dollars, right? And this was going to be a $2 billion project in terms of economic development. And there are huge oil fields in Canada that they were trying to bring to market. If I am Justin Trudeau and I want to do what's best for my citizens of Canada, well, now I will just find another market, and probably they will go west to their own ports in British Columbia and send the oil to around the world, probably to China, right? China has to import over 10 million barrels of oil a day to sustain their economy. One of their biggest vulnerabilities is they do not have a domestic oil source. And the world just used that to their advantage. Maybe we could liberate millions of Uyghur Muslims from concentration camps. Maybe we could improve the human rights in China. The way the OPEC cartels used oil to import their influence around the world, well, energy independence liberated us from OPEC. OPEC doesn't get to decide anymore. Now we're going to give up American energy independence and see other countries rise to preeminence. Again, I don't know who this is benefiting other than the radical environmental left, who never trusted Bernie Sanders, never trusted Joe Biden. They wanted Bernie Sanders. They wanted Elizabeth Warren. Biden had to win their support somehow. He got it, and now he's delivering. And it's putting the American taxpayers and the American economy and American national security last.
Incredible. The butterfly effect. Daniel, really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Biden signed a series of executive orders today to fight the CCP virus. One order requires Americans to wear a mask for mass transit, whether that's private or public. Another orders FEMA to pay states the full cost of using their National Guards to set up vaccination centers. He's also invoking the Defense Production Act to produce PPE, vaccines, and other supplies. The Defense Production Act, of course, is a Cold War-era federal law to mobilize domestic industry for national defense purposes. And talking about tax policy, sometimes multinational businesses will set up complex overseas structures to avoid paying high taxes at home. It's a loss for the American citizen, of course. But when the Trump administration lowered the GILTI tax, that's a tax on certain global income, many of these companies actually brought jobs back to the United States. But now the Biden administration is talking about raising the GILTI tax again and the corporate tax. So I spoke to Manuel Ramirez. He's the president and the chief executive officer of RJI International. It's a tax firm serving over 1,200 companies across 20 countries. I asked him, if taxes go up, will we see these companies again start setting up complex structures overseas?
Well, I mean, that's been the history of American companies, right? Taking advantage of the tax benefits and the loopholes that exist. These are certainly things that historically large, sophisticated corporations in America have taken advantage of. So yes, I would imagine there would be a large number of restructuring, tax inversions, establishment of foreign companies to take advantage of the lower tax domiciles.
Have you had companies come to you with concerns? Are people worried about what the new administration might bring?
Yes, in fact, then President candidate Biden Trump and presidential candidate Kamala Harris both specifically stated that among the first things they would do is repeal Donald Trump's 2017 Tax Act. That would mean a doubling in some cases of the capital gains tax rate. Then now President Biden spoke about the elimination of real estate provisions, such as the like-kind exchange, Section 1031 provision. Today, historically, for many decades, an investor could sell one property and roll that gain into the next property, allowing all the capital to be put to work. Well, now you have to pay a tax, so less capital available for the next transaction. There's been discussion about increasing the estate taxes and reducing the amount of exemptions that a person who makes wealth can pass on to their children. These are some of the examples that we've seen. I believe it was the PR Wire that reported that there are nearly 9 million expatriates. These are former U.S. citizens that have left the United States and have given up their citizenship. And in fact, in the first 6 months of 2020, nearly 6,000 people have given up their citizenship in the United States, much larger historically than we've seen in recent history.
And you think this is out of fear of higher taxes?
Well, certainly. Some of the more progressive elements of the Democratic Party have discussed a wealth tax. So in California, for example, there was a wealth tax to be imposed on anyone with a value, net worth of $30 million or more. It's the first time we've seen states decide they wanted to tax the wealth of an individual. And if that theory, because California has a tendency to leave tax discussions, hits into the federal mainstream, we may see now, like France has, wealth taxes imposed on the most wealthiest individuals. Those are the types of taxes that become so burdensome that people start to leave the country, unfortunately, rather than retaining them here in the United States and taxing them fairly so that they stay in the United States.
Incredible. We'll keep an eye on it. Manuel, thank you so much for your analysis.
My pleasure. Thank you for having us.
And the Senate Finance Committee will consider the nomination of Janet Yellen for Treasury Secretary on Friday. The full Senate could confirm her later that day. The Biden administration is pushing to confirm key cabinet members for CCP virus pandemic efforts. Yellen urged lawmakers to act big on coronavirus relief spending. She argues that the economic benefits far outweigh the risks of a higher debt burden. Meanwhile, the Treasury Department on Wednesday named several people to senior Treasury posts that don't require Senate confirmation. Yellen served as the head of the Federal Reserve from 2014 to 2018. Speaking of the Fed, hedge fund founder and value investment guru Seth Klarman, he says that central bank and government stimulus has broken the stock market and eroded price discovery. He says investors aren't able to see the risk building because the Fed's interventions are papering over the cracks. NTD's Tomo Zimik reports.
The founder of hedge fund Baupost Group, Seth Klarman, told clients that the flood of central bank stimulus and cheap money has convinced investors that risk has vanished, eroding the market's role as a mechanism of price discovery. Klarman called the Fed an 800-pound gorilla that has conditioned investors to ignore risk. He said the biggest problem with these unprecedented and sustained government and central bank interventions is that risks to capital become masked even as they mount. The comments come as the real economy continues to sputter. Another 900,000 Americans filed for unemployment last week, and only about half the jobs lost during the pandemic have been recovered. Yet the U.S. stock markets are breaking new all-time highs. Klarman said, but as with frogs in water that is slowly being heated to a boil, investors are being conditioned not to recognize the danger. He says another problem with this is widening the wealth gap. Those at the top who have large exposure to stock markets have seen their wealth skyrocket, while those at the bottom who have few financial assets remain at a standstill. He also said that, while the interventions have helped boost economic activity and prevented an even more dramatic labor market collapse, they have also piled on more debt for future generations to pay down. Reporting by Tom Ozimak, NTD News.
Wall Street closed mixed on Thursday, but the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq again closed at record highs. You can thank the Fed for that. The Dow fell over 12 points or 0.04%. S&P 500 gained over 1 point or 0.03%. The Nasdaq added about 74 points or 0.55%. Jobless claims dipped last week but still remain exceptionally high. Other data shows the housing market, manufacturing, it remains strong. Intel and IBM just reported earnings after market close. Intel's last quarter sales beat analyst forecasts, but IBM's revenue missed targets. Bitcoin today fell over 10%. Some say it's because of fear of tighter regulation, while others say it may be because of a report there's a critical flaw in the Bitcoin blockchain. We haven't been able to confirm that just yet. And it doesn't seem to be deterring Blackrock. The world's largest asset manager has joined the Bitcoin business. Big boon for the Bitcoin bugs. Blackrock says 2 of its funds can now invest in the cryptocurrency. The 2 funds are BlackRock Strategic Income Opportunities and BlackRock Global Allocation Fund. But they can only trade on cash-settled Bitcoin futures. That means the holder will get a cash credit when the contract expires. And they can only use exchanges registered with the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. Right now, that's only the CME. Bitcoin is fine, great investment this year so far. But if you're storing it on a Bitcoin wallet, just don't forget your password. One guy did just that, and now he can't access hundreds of millions of dollars worth of coins. So how can you safely store your cryptocurrency? NTD's Patrick Hayden asked an expert.
It's recently been reported that a cryptocurrency owner lost over $200 million worth of Bitcoin because he lost the password to his digital wallet. We spoke to a cryptocurrency expert to find out how you can avoid his fate.
So the main strength of crypto is also the main weakness, because the main strength is that you are the only one who can control your wallet with cryptocurrency in it, with your the so-called private key, which means that if you lose your private key, there is no one else who can access your account and restore it.
He says there are 2 types of wallets, hot and cold. Hot wallets connect to the internet so you can quickly buy crypto at the click of a button. They have risks though.
The so-called hot wallets. And there have been cases when exchanges have been hacked and thousands of private keys to thousands of wallets have been stolen.
Pikolov says you should only store a small amount in your hot wallet at any time, because they can be compromised at any moment. Instead, he says you should use a cold wallet for long-term storage. They're physical storage devices.
And there are many services that allow you to securely store your cryptocurrencies. The principle of them is the so-called cold wallets. These are the physical drives, for example, the flash drives, which are not connected to internet, where you store your private keys.
He says that educating yourself about the technical aspects is so important in an industry where regulation is still underdeveloped.
This is why we're having this conversation, because I believe that education is critical for more people to become sophisticated cryptocurrency users and for us to have less scams and less technical failures.
He also says there are hundreds of exchanges, and even small ones have up to 100 hack attempts per month. So it's important to choose a trading exchange that has a high security standard and a good history. And don't lose your password. Reporting by Patrick Hayden, NTD News.
A federal judge has refused to order Amazon to reinstate social media site Parler. She says Parler didn't meet the standard for her to issue a preliminary injunction. The judge says it's within Amazon's right to refuse to host Parler, but she did say the court is not dismissing Parler's claims at this time and the case is still ongoing. Amazon suspended Parler earlier this month, saying the site violated its policies, but Parler says the suspension was motivated by political reasons. Earlier this week, Parler CEO John Matz said the site will be back up and running by the end of the month. Best of luck, John. Still to come this evening. Some Chinese firms want to stay on the New York Stock Exchange. They're asking it to stop delisting them. And Alibaba investors aren't convinced that all is well inside the firm, even though its founder Jack Ma made a brief public appearance this week. Some already sold their shares. That and more after the break.
When you look at TV networks in America, a soundbite and fight-it-out culture prevails on news and commentary programs. As a Canadian, I'm fascinated with America. Back this great tradition of free thought.
Unicom Hong Kong. The company's asked the exchange to review its decision. The NYSE was following an order by President Trump. It bars Americans from investing in companies Washington says has ties to the Chinese military. This triggered a wide fallout with U.S. investors quickly selling off stakes and index providers cutting them off from their benchmarks. So far, nearly $6 billion has been wiped out from these companies' Hong Kong traded shares. And the outgoing Federal Communications Commission chairman is warning regulators about the threat China poses to telecom networks. NTD's Patrick Hayden reports.
Outgoing Federal Communications Commission Chairman Ajit Pai says potential Chinese spying, threats to US telecom networks and internet freedom are the biggest national security issues for the next 4 years. Pai says he's concerned about a wide array of activities from China, including surveillance and economic espionage. He also says China could potentially inject malware into networks in the US or abroad, and that bad things can happen when insecure equipment is used to handle sensitive information. Pai joined the Trump administration in January 2017 and stepped down on Wednesday. During his tenure, he cracked down on Chinese telecom giants like Huawei and ZTE. Last month, the FCC began the process of revoking China Telecom's authorization to operate in the US. Pai said on Tuesday the Chinese Communist Party has a very determined world view, and they want to dominate this space and exert their will even beyond their own borders. Under his leadership, Huawei and ZTE were designated national security threats. This barred US firms from tapping into more than $8 billion of government funding to buy equipment from companies. Reporting by Patrick Hayden, NTD News.
And Chinese billionaire Jack Ma's short video appearance has done little to ease investor concerns about his relationship with Beijing. It's making some hesitant about owning stock in the Chinese e-commerce giant.
Investors of Chinese e-commerce stock Alibaba are having doubts, even after its founder Jack Ma showed up in a public video to ease concerns. The brief appearance comes after he disappeared from the public eye for 3 months. Alibaba shares fell more than 3% on Thursday. Michael Houston, founder of California investment advisory firm Bay Street Capital Holdings, says we all know that just because he showed up doesn't necessarily explain what is going on. Houston says the halting of the Ant IPO caused uncertainty and that Alibaba was not a prudent investment for it going forward. His firm cut its holding in the Chinese firm last year from 8% to less than 1%. Financial advisory company Cumberland Advisors also sold Alibaba when the Ant IPO was pulled. The company's chairman, David Kotak, says when you don't know what to do in an evolving situation like this, you can't use traditional securities analytics to reach decisions. We are standing aside and watching. Chinese regulators are starting to rein in Ma's financial and e-commerce empires, and that has weighed on its stock, which remains below levels prior to the IPO cancellation. Leland Miller, CEO of U.S.-based consultancy China Beige Book, says what his actual state is will be completely up to Beijing to reveal to us. He adds that what we do know is whether Jack is running around, Jack is hiding, or something else. Alibaba is not in the clear. There is a lot more of the story still to see.
And still to come, if you're thinking about remodeling your home, we have some tips to help you save money. And if you need to stand for long hours during work, you might find this new device helpful. Find out how it works after the break.
It's just clear as day. The media, whether it's broadcast, cable, or print media, has become extremely biased. And I started looking online for alternative ways to get information. And I saw an ad for a free trial. And I looked at it and I said, Epoch Times. I mean, come on, this is end of days type of stuff. I mean, what are they going to be talking about here? And I said, well, it's a free trial. Let me dig in. Is it giving me both sides? Is it giving me an objective point of view here? I have looked for opportunities to see where they might be biased, and I don't find it. It has given me a level of trust in media that I didn't think I'd ever get back. I love the Epoch Times because it has renewed my faith in the idea that a reliable, responsible, non-biased source of information is available. And I can say that I love it because of that.
Before you start remodeling your home, take a look at these remodeling myths. It might help save you from yourself.
Before you make a major investment in a remodel or renovation of your home, make sure you aren't falling for one of those home improvement myths. Cracks can cost you thousands in repairs. Cracks in the wall aren't always that big of an issue. Most are just a result of small seasonal expansion and contractions. It doesn't mean there's a structural failure. Wallpaper works anywhere. No, wallpaper does not work anywhere. If not hung properly, wallpaper will look horrible, and depending on the room, it may be prone to fading or condensation. Doing it yourself always saves money. Just because you're handy doesn't mean you should always do a home improvement project yourself. Things like major roofing projects, certain electrical repairs, and structural work may need the expertise of a professional. It's always best to know your limits. And pools add value. If you think adding a pool will boost the value of your home, consider the location. In cooler climates, pools can be more of a liability. They cost a lot to maintain in the winter, and some home buyers just don't want one.
And a Japanese startup has designed a wearable device to let you sit while standing. It'll help those who need to stand for long hours and doesn't even need any power.
The exoskeleton lets you sit while standing. It straps to the legs and disperses your body weight, making standing easier and less tiring.
Our product is an exoskeleton that helps to reduce the burden on the legs and waist for people who work long hours. The advantages of our product are it allows people to walk or move while wearing it, and people can put it on easily regardless of their body shape or size.
It can be used by factory workers, surgeons, chefs, hairdressers, or anyone who has to stand for hours in one place. It's lightweight and all mechanical.
Another advantage is that the product can be used without a power source.
The device is scheduled for a market release in January 2021. It'll retail for around $5,000.
That's the latest business updates for today. Thank you for watching. See you tomorrow.